2009, Emily sent me an email. She wanted to do a project. She wanted to figure out how to build a portable gynecological exam table. Instead, I recruited her to work with my class at the time, an appropriate technology class, because I thought this project should really be one of collaboration. I loved the idea of Emily, who was so articulate and passionate about the project, inspiring groups of women who might otherwise be intimidated to start using the metal shop. At the same time, I was really intrigued with this image of young men being compelled to imagine what it was like to undergo a gynecological exam. It's just a radical shift in the normal point of view. None of us knew what we were doing, but there was such excitement about this project from people that we would talk to that we just had to keep doing it.
I traveled to El Salvador in 2009 with a January term course in women's health in developing nations. Shadowing nurse and doctor teams, I saw a version of medicine that really inspired me. Basic Health was using doctors to teach Salvadoran providers to give low-tech screenings for cervical cancer. This was in place of the complex Pap smear. These low-tech screenings consisted of acetic acid and cryotherapy, which is freezing of precancerous cervical lesions. The clinics I saw were a unique combination of gynecology, public health, obstetrics, and family planning. I wanted to see every procedure, every treatment, and I wanted to be there for every post-examination conversation between the woman and her provider. I was desperate to keep medicine, public health, basic health, and El Salvador in my life, so I really scoured my experience for something I could do. I saw one need again and again. The lack of portable, affordable, and durable equipment in low-resource communities is a true barrier to screening women for this terrible disease. This is a photo of the most portable gynecological examination table available at the time. It weighed about 100 pounds. It had one collapsing feature. It had to be carried in the back of a pickup, and it needed to be carried to the clinic site by 2 people. Not exactly portable. I felt compelled to find a solution to this unique problem. We brainstormed a lot. We made a cardboard mock-up of this Crazy Creek design chair. We took a stolen wooden lunch table and we hacked it apart and added stirrups. We also made tiny little metal models of our ideas. We used cheap, widely available materials like electrical conduit, which is 1/5 the cost of steel and globally available. We also used recycled bicycle tire inner tubes. So we created the pink bed, which Mauricio here is demonstrating. This was made of conduit and recycled bicycle tire inner tubes. We also entertained the idea of a corset backrest. We made a failed foray into PVC piping. And in August of 2009, with huge help from Basic Health, we decided to build our design in a public shop in San Salvador. Locating and buying materials, building and experimenting in a public space, and working alongside local fabricators really showed us the weaknesses of this design. The literally weak stirrups were a problem. It was far too large. However, those recycled bicycle inner tubes, really comfortable for patients. Who knew? Designing at Amherst and hopping up on the table every once in a while was really not enough to test how this design would function in a real-world scenario. So in 2011, I went to El Salvador for a 3rd time with a new prototype that was a chair-like conduit model. I'm really proud of this project's ability to continue testing, but this is where we experienced many of our misadventures. Like the time that we found out about the cardboard box embargo the day before we were to fly to El Salvador with the beds in cardboard boxes. Also, portability in the shop didn't always translate to portability in the field. Another time, the bed got stuck in customs for a week until the authorities decided it was really not a threat. After my Division III, my final senior thesis project, I was thrilled that Katie Coupe was interested enough in the project to keep going with it. I was also thrilled when Aaron decided to co-collaborate with her, and it's really been an honor and a privilege to watch as they take this project and make it their own.
I started collaborating with Aaron in 2012. Aaron was studying applied design, engineering, and art, while I was more along the lines of public health, dance movement therapy, and psychology. So, needless to say, we had a lot to learn from each other. I was firmly grounded in the past prototypes and the public health aspects of the project, while Aaron had engineering and fabrication skills that I knew would benefit the future prototypes. So, Aaron agreed to collaborate with me, and for better or for worse, we embarked on a collaborative journey that continues today.
As a latecomer to the project, I was overwhelmed by what had already been done and trying to weed out why each and every piece was as it was. I simply had to learn a lot. There was an egress of medical knowledge, an egress of all the design decisions that had been made, and as a designer, I wanted to jump in and immediately start contributing to the design. However, with all the work that had already been done, I had to be careful not to step on people's toes. As we continued working on the prototypes, it was clear that certain elements of the design were going to need to be re-envisioned. I was constantly questioning why things had been done and how they had been done, and simply put, Katie got fed up with me and asking why constantly. A seemingly simple problem of creating an examination surface was a more complex problem than at surface level. There were conflicting interests with the way the bed would be used and how it was going to be put together, and many of the decisions we had made about the design previously were simply based off of assumptions.
So basically what we're talking about here is a portable exam surface that needs to be lightweight. It needs to be easily collapsible and transported. And while doing this, it also has to support the weight of a human body and have that body in the appropriate position for a cervical examination.
On top of all of that, it had to be perceived by doctors and patients as an aesthetic, functional, and sturdy and reliable tool that they could be used on a daily basis. With all this, one question that was constantly at the back of our heads, and other people were asking as well, is how would this thing be made? Would it be made by a manufacturer employing advanced techniques such as welding, machining, and other cumbersome processes?
Or would it be made using a screwdriver, a hacksaw, a drill, and a conduit bender?
Design is a matter of experimentation with constant research and a process of testing prototypes. At times, we had to step back from the given problem at hand and compartmentalize certain elements of what we were trying to focus on. When we were first working on the bed and building these initial prototypes, we were trying to hit every problem on the head and fulfill all the requirements, and we were simply setting ourselves up to run around in circles.
So let's take a look at some of those past prototypes. And just before we do, I want everyone to know that some of these never even made it out of the shop and were certainly not tested on humans. So there was a prototype that Emily and I made that inadvertently ended up looking like a TV dinner tray table. This design really just wasn't strong enough. And it actually broke after a presentation when an eager audience member decided to give it a try. And then later, when we made a design that had all the functional elements, it was extremely comfortable, but it was terrifying to look at. We even went as far as to name this bed the Trap, to signify the trapezoidal configuration of the silhouette of the legs, of course. And then our most recent design, most recently, we produced a prototype that was over-engineered, and it was far too expensive to be feasible to be produced. Basically, when I list these all off, it sounds like a lot of weaknesses and a lot of missteps, and it really was. But there's something else I see in all these aforementioned prototypes. There's things that come out from behind those glaring downfalls. So let's bring it back. The TV dinner tray table. It was our first prototype that was fully collapsible, and it had no removable components that could be lost or add to setup time. And it was made into a backpack so that it could be easily transported wherever it needed to go. And that completely changed the design from that point on. And then the Trap, the terrifying design. It was one of our least expensive prototypes to date. It employed a bracketing system, which made the bed increasingly sturdy, but also opened doors for us to potentially produce this design with globally accessible tools outside of a fabrication studio. And then our over-engineered design. This design really showed us the power of on-site testing. When outreach groups took this table with them to do screenings, we realized that so many of the revisions that we had made were just irrelevant in the field. With this design, we had taken a step back and we allowed ourselves to use almost every tool available to us. What came from all this was making low-tech and high-tech prototypes and allowing ourselves to pick and choose those elements that we wanted to create a hybrid design.
As we continued prototyping and moving into the next year, we compiled a class that was basically going to be focused around simplifying the design. During this class, we worked to make the fabrication of the bed simpler, as well as more low cost.
So one thing that I learned from this project is when to identify when you're going down the wrong path, or rather when you and possibly a few of your design partners are going on your own misadventures. In reality, the design process is a convoluted mess. We had to be open to criticism, willing to tear down our design and build it back up for the sake of making something better. And we intend to keep working across disciplines, across borders, and as always, beyond the scope of our own personal knowledge, collaborating, skill sharing, redesigning, and challenging each other and ourselves.